Hi, I'm Eric Ostro, host of Live at the Lortel. For Season 3, we are focusing on the intersection of arts and advocacy. So many off-Broadway artists give back to their communities. This season, we are giving them the opportunity to speak about how and why they chose the causes they devote themselves to, and how those causes help make them the people and artists they are today. Good evening, everybody. My name is Eric Ostro. Welcome to Live at the Lortel. We're very happy to have you here this evening. We have a very special guest, but first I want to bring on my good friend and co-host, John Andrew.
Well, hello, Eric. How are you today, my love?
Hello, my dear. How are you?
I'm very good. I'm so excited to speak to our guest today. Why don't you tell us a little bit about him?
Yes, so Preston Berger has performed with the Metropolitan Opera Children's Chorus, served as a dance captain for Rachel Klein in her delightfully ghoulish dance theater work, The Tragedy of Maria, at Dixon Place. As of right now, currently Preston is on the advisory board of Epic Players Neuro-Inclusive Theater Company, where he also participates as an actor and a mentor, and the Disability Advisory Council for Beat Global. Let's just bring him on and start our conversation. Welcome, Preston Berger. Thank you so much. We're so honored to have you here today.
Thank you for having me. This is truly a privilege.
Well, it's ours. So thank you so much. So let's get right down to it. The past, 19 or probably almost 20 months, we have been dealing with something in the world which shut down our beloved thing that we do. You want to talk about it a little bit? Like, where were you? Where did you get shut down? Were you working on something?
I was. So I was at the time living in East Harlem. Actually, thank heaven it was on 110th and Madison, so I was right by the park. I still had some exposure to, nature.
Yeah.
I was working for City University of New York as a CUNY Leads advisor. LEAD stands for Linking Employment, Academics, and Disability Services. So I was doing career coaching for students with disabilities. I was involved in Epic. I had just come off of doing a production of Peter and the Starcatcher with them.
Oh,
okay.
And I was in rehearsals with them for what was at the time going to be their spring cabaret at Joe's Pub. And then all of that just came to a stop. And what I found to be particularly interesting about quarantine is that the disability community really showed up. We really came out. I'm really proud of the work I did with my team at CUNY. Especially, we pivoted to virtual right away.
Yeah.
Because the students were asking for it. So we just figured out a way to set up Microsoft Teams, which we'd been playing with a little bit already. I was the advisor for a club, so immediately we started meeting again within, I think, the second week. With Epic, too, I had a really good role model because we pivoted right to virtual, as though nothing could stop us. We set up a way to record ourselves singing by, we would have to put earplugs in order to sing to the backing tracks, and then they would be spliced together during editing. But we just kept rehearsing. We kept doing classes. It was really a treat when, come June, we had a virtual cast party.
Amazing.
We didn't get to do a full-blown cabaret, but we got to record some really great tracks, one of which was by somebody who was just featured on, our music director, who was featured on New York One Today, Scott Evan Davis. He wrote a musical before he got involved with Epic that was about autistic children. I think he actually wrote it with children at an autism-focused school. And he wrote a song called "If the World Only Knew" for that particular cast, and we got to record that.
That is amazing.
So all I can say really is, if anything, I'm just speaking from my own experience. I don't want to go around saying COVID was great. It was terrible. But I feel like for me and my community, it really brought out some of the best sides of us. Because it took away all the sensory stuff that comes with living with a disability. It's just nothing filters out living on the autism spectrum. And all that just went away. Right. So from the comfort of our own home, we could learn how to check our emails, organize ourselves, get prepped. I was living with roommates who, thankfully, we all actually really got along and we all communicated really well. So we made sure that if one of us, say, needed the living room to record something, we just put it on our whiteboard and everyone gave each other the time and space to do it. My roommates actually really helped me through that period, as did my girlfriend, because we all just made sure to have times where we all got together and did stuff like play a card game, to coordinate ourselves. During COVID, I got to participate in a virtual arts festival that the Roundabout sponsored in collaboration with the 5 main disability-focused theater companies in New York. And that was the first time, I think, probably in, I want to say, at least 8 years that I had ever choreographed anything. And I got supreme mentorship under a phenomenal choreographer named Jerron Herman, who works with Kinetic Light. And he really pushed me to just keep leaning in to the story I was trying to tell and get me to relate it to what was going on.
Amazing. Preston, I have a question, just for people who don't know, and language is important. What is neurodiversity? Can you tell us what that is and what that means? And
yes, I can. I should qualify that by saying I can give you my personal definition.
Yes,
the really fascinating thing about being a part of the neurodiverse community is that each person you ask is going to apply a different label to themselves that might not even be neurodiverse. Some of them prefer to be called autistic.
Okay.
Or whatever their other diagnosis is. Some of us prefer neurodivergent. Some of us prefer alterability. Like the list goes on. So I'm just giving you my own personal understanding based on what I've observed.
And you prefer?
I prefer. That's actually a really good question. It depends on when you ask me.
Okay, that's fair enough.
I'm fluid between like neurodivergent, neurodiverse. My diagnosis is Asperger's syndrome.
Okay.
Which has been phased out of the diagnostic and statistical manual. Now it fits under my generation of Asperger's got grandfathered into autism spectrum disorder.
Okay. Interesting.
Which actually, there's always going to be controversy no matter where you go with stuff like this. But I think the beautiful thing is that that at least does set up the parameter and communicates very clearly that autism really is a spectrum.
Right.
So now getting to neurodiversity in particular, it grew out of the autism movement, that term. But the distinction in my mind is that neurodiverse can encompass several other diagnoses, such as dyslexia or ADHD or bipolar depression, or generalized anxiety disorder. Okay. It's any kind of diagnosis that communicates one way or the other that our brain is wired differently from the medically accepted standard of typical.
Okay. All right.
So I'm sorry, John. So explain that just one more time so our people that are listening and watching can understand it. So under that umbrella sits the all of that what you said. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now I understand it.
I think the reason autism is the go-to when we talk about neurodiversity is because it was out of the parental and eventually self-advocacy movement that neurodiversity was born.
Okay.
Got it.
Makes sense now.
So they kind of like took the charge or led the getting the language to that, and it also included all of these other things.
Correct.
All right, fantastic.
And when did this come about, or when?
I don't know. That's a really good question. I actually have a friend who's a sociologist who's writing a book on what he did was he lived with I want to say 8 different families who had family members with autism, and these were individuals who are either nonverbal or need some kind of 24-hour supervision.
I see.
And if you talk to them, if you were to say, so talk to me about neurodiversity, they probably would look at you and say, what are you talking about? I don't think that way.
Yeah.
I'm just who I am. From what I could, but I guess what I'm trying to say is I would have to check in with the experts on when it started, but it seemed from my observations growing up in that movement to I started seeing the word neurodiversity around the late 2000s.
Okay.
That's when I started seeing it.
That's a perfectly great answer, which is why, what I've been reading about, this week about it, which I find fascinating, it was, how they label things and what they label and what, so I was just interested to see when it came into your life of what that is. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Around 2006, 2007 is when I started becoming familiar with that word and embracing it as maybe an identity that described me.
Can we go into talking about epic players? I love that the EPIC stands for empower, perform, include, and create. So I wanted to ask some stuff around all of those words. So how does EPIC empower both participants and audience, and what does that do for all involved, and what does that look like, the empowerment aspect of EPIC?
EPIC is a unique animal, in my opinion, because I have in the past been exposed to several different theaters or projects that cater to, for lack of a better word, I kind of hate this term, but just for shorthand, special needs populations. EPIC pays their actors. So what stood out to me when I started learning about EPIC, and having worked in higher ed for 5 years in career development counseling for specifically individuals with disabilities, for me, the professional workforce of artists aspect to it really stood out to me as empowering.
Yeah, that's incredible.
I remember when we were getting ready for Peter and the Starcatcher, and we were going to have a group of K through 12 students from District 75. For those of you who don't know what District 75 is, that's essentially the citywide special education district. And it dawned on me that this might be the first time ever that these students are looking at a group of professional actors who look like them. Not only, and I don't mean just one or two, a whole company of people with neurodiverse disorders who, just by sheer virtue of performing a play can demonstrate, hey, if you've ever dreamed of the arts being in your life as more than just a hobby, it's possible and actually quite achievable.
What was that like for the audience of District 75 to see that? What was some of the response, or what was that like?
Oh, they ate it up.
Yeah.
They absolutely loved it. Have you guys seen Peter and the Starcatcher?
Yeah, it's so much fun.
It is. I mean, like, basically, the way I like to describe it for people who don't know it is, imagine it, like, obviously it's not as dark as this, but like, imagine taking the Dark Knight, like, archetype of, the kind of more realistic, more sinister backstory, and just apply that to Peter Pan.
I can see that.
With like a more silly, kind of playful side to it. Plus, it's a devised show, which actually devised theater is a very highly used modality for creation in disability-focused theater.
Okay.
Because devised theater gives you the opportunity to just, you get your prompts, you get your parameters, but then whatever comes out, that's the product.
You kind of just answered my second question slightly. I was going to ask, what are the differences in a neurodiverse performance as opposed to a perceived neurotypical performance? And so you kind of answered that in a wonderful way. But further along the lines of that, I've worked in traditional theaters that have had like a sensory sensitive performance, and it's in a perceived neurotypical environment that we create this thing, but we make adjustments for the sensory specific audience. And so I'm curious about what creation and the creative process looks like when this sensory sensitive or neurodiverse is at the top of mind, right? Like the beginning of the creation process starts there. And how is that different than when you've been in, say, the more traditional forms of creating something?
I don't know if it's really that different. That's the thing. It depends on the project.
Yeah.
It depends on the needs of the individual, people who are involved. I'll speak from my experience doing shows with Epic. We did do a devised show during quarantine. That was their spring main stage. I wasn't a part of that process, so I can't really speak to how they ran that. When I did Peter and the Starcatcher, and even when I've rehearsed for the cabarets, it really doesn't feel all that much different from the days when I was a kid doing community theater.
That's fantastic.
And I think maybe the one difference is that because there's that just kind of collective understanding that our brains operate a little differently, there's more, I think, vigilance about how they give directions. They tend to give much more concrete, short, very black and white kinds of directions to alleviate any potential for confusion.
Yeah.
They're actually, I think, much better about scheduling time so that, we know when we're on deck and when we can, go about our business.
Right.
And there's also, I think, probably a little more effort put in to dedicating time to building trust among the players, so that we can, develop our own secret language for communicating and, have more of an ensemble feel instead of just relying on the director to tell us everything.
Well, so what you're saying is storytelling and creativity is creativity no matter.
Basically.
I love it. That's great.
Preston, I'm fascinated. When did you catch the bug? When we asked some of our artists this question. When did you know? Oh, this is what I want to do.
It's a good question. Unconsciously, I guess when I was born, my parents have this story about
early, yeah.
I feel a need to tell this story. I feel like
please, of course.
And probably also was a good indicator that something was different about me.
Okay.
I was a scooter. I wasn't a crawler. And my parents have this story about me. It's 6 months old. I'm just like scooting along on the floor. And then out of nowhere, I just drop to my tummy and turn myself in a circle using my hands. And then I get back up and start scooting. Consciously, when I actually started, when I caught the bug, I was 3 years old. I actually remember this. I caught a tape that my father had recorded of the Grammy Awards. It was 1988. And Michael Jackson had that epic performance of The Way You Make Me Feel and Man in the Mirror. Mind you, I didn't even see The Way You Make Me Feel. He didn't catch that at the time. I just watched Man in the Mirror. And I remember looking at that and thinking, I don't know what that is, but I want to do that. I've since grown to not view Michael Jackson as a role model, but I do. Look, I mean, if it weren't for him, I never would have even thought about dancing. From there, I think the next step was Raffi.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I love Raffi. I have a lot of nieces and nephews, and I know a lot of Raffi music. Yeah.
I know. Can you believe that guy ran for prime minister?
Yes, I can. Yeah, I mean, that's a whole other podcast. But yeah.
There's a picture of me when I guess I'm about 4 years old. There's like this ukulele that my dad got me, and he took a tennis ball and he stuck it on a stick, and you can see a picture of me reenacting an entire concert.
Oh my God.
Here's the thing. I wasn't reenacting the concert. I was Raffi.
Hey. Yeah.
By the way, when I was around 9 or 10, that degree of fantasy play out, somehow or another, I don't even know how he came on my radar, but that transferred over into Bob Ross.
No.
Wow.
There's video footage of me reenacting an entire episode, including making the painting.
Wow.
Saying all the lines. I grew my hair out. What you have to understand, though, and this kind of gets to the heart of neurodivergence. I wasn't reenacting anything. I was becoming these people. Thank God I had the parents I did. They always knew just how to snap me out of it and remind me that I was Preston. But I remember as I grew older into like my adulthood, into my 30s, having a conversation with my psychiatrist who had known me since I was 4. And I asked him, what was the tell? And he just said, you had a very hard time with reality. And when you got overwhelmed, you retreated into fantasy.
Wow.
And so actually it made a lot of sense that theater was the key that unlocked the door for me, because it gave me a structured, like environment with parameters where I could deliver on this sort of fantasy play out tendency that came with my diagnosis, and then compartmentalize it and be a little bit more ready to deal with the real world, which honestly is scary. The real world is scary, there's so many different levels of communication that a person needs to learn in order to navigate the world. And a person has to be willing to learn how to navigate it. Theater gave me the place where I felt motivated to overcome that obstacle and learn how to join the rest of humanity.
And that structure, I mean, I know we keep going back to that word structure, but I mean, I think it's incredibly important, not only for everyone. I mean, I need structure in my life. It gives me purpose. It gives me knowing what to do. I'm sure it played a huge part in your life, especially when it came to theater and creating that structure.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, one of the if you were to take a training in how to work with a at bare minimum, a K through 12 student on the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of common themes you'll hear are very clear structure, a lot of repetition, mitigate as many sensory distractions as possible, and meet them where they're at. And I don't know what it was about theater for me, but it just worked. It provided that, like, it unlocked the door. There, for other autistics, it might be auto mechanics, or it might be, kind of that more stereotypical math and science, computer science archetype. But that's not the only thing we gravitate toward that, connects us. For some people, it's the arts, and that's what it was for me.
I mean, just like listening to you talking about the training it takes to do that work. That's what a good director does, right? Like they meet their actors and their creatives where they're at, and they mitigate a lot of the distractions. Like a good director does all of those things. So that's and theater. How wonderful that there's a place for you to have that sense of play and creativity. I'm thrilled to hear that.
Yeah, I find it fascinating too. My best friend's son is the same thing. It's music for him as opposed to theater. And the way they introduce structure into his life is music. And he's so obsessed with music and all kinds of music. So that is the way they navigate through life with him. That's the key with him, and the way his mind works. It's the music and becoming a musician.
I hope you don't mind if I ask, how have you seen him evolve ever since they discovered this?
I've seen the good and the bad.
Right.
But when the music fills his life and his ears, he is a different human being. That's what I can say. A completely different human being who will hear and listen, and he's young. So he will listen and hear and do what he needs to do with the structure they have put into his life, as long as he knows that he can play an instrument later, or that he can listen to another piece of music, or that he can get, he can download something, that he wants to watch or listen to on YouTube or whatever. And it's so interesting. It can be he can be night and day. And it's been fascinating to watch. And his growth has been incredible. Everybody has good days and bad days. I have a good day. I have good days and bad days. It doesn't matter, spectrum or not, but the music has helped him immensely, and it's been magnificent to watch. I'm curious though, Preston, when you said that you became Raffi, right? You became these people when your parents, obviously you have two wonderful parents who helped navigate you through your childhood to the man you are today. But when they would talk to you and say, this is not, when they would bring you back to reality, what was there a fight about it? Was there, or you just really understood? I'm just curious about you as a child, and when they said, no, this is who you are. You're Preston. You're not this. That's too personal of a question.
No. That's a great question. I should clarify. It wasn't just my two parents. My family actually is pretty close. So I had really attentive and involved aunts and uncles and grandparents. I have an older brother and a younger sister. I had a lot of people who were in my corner. And I have only recently, like, been kind of in a place where I can ask questions about, what was I like when I was young? Mm-hmm. I have no conscious memory. No, that's not true. I do have a conscious memory of, I think, being 3 years old and getting kicked out of preschool because I couldn't assimilate.
Right.
And then that was when I got evaluated and got sent to a more therapeutic preschool.
Well, they didn't understand, especially at the time, right?
Right. I think what did it was that I was really good in school. I liked school. And so I was motivated to perform academically.
Yeah.
Especially because I grew up in a good neighborhood. I grew up in Massapequa out on Long Island where they had a music program and they would do plays. And so I think really what it came down to was you've got to do well in school if you want to keep playing instruments and performing.
Got it.
And I catapulted out of special education with that structure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I bet.
Yeah. You've mentioned dance and choreography.
Yes.
What is it about dance as an expression that you take to? What is it about dancing and choreography and movement that is special to you and makes you want to create dances?
It's nonverbal.
I never thought about that. Yeah. I
think that's the simplest way I can put it. It's nonverbal. It forces me to, in your research, I don't know if you guys came across that. One of the challenges that a lot of people with neurodiverse disorders have is that nonverbal language is, it takes a while. It takes a while to really crack that code. And dance sort of gives me this way to explore my own nonverbal language. And that in turn helps sort of open up my eyes to other people's nonverbal language.
Did you find yourself choreographing and feeling music through your body at a very young age?
Yes. Oh, yes.
So hearing a piece of music and letting it, come through your body and how it manifests itself?
Yeah, actually, it's funny you mentioned that. Some of my earliest performances are dances I did to a Michael Jackson song. Then I got connected with a local dance studio. Wow, I can't believe this is happening. The way you guys answered this question, I'm like remembering something.
Yeah, good. I want to hear
it. Dance was my entryway into the arts. That was the first thing I really tried to explore. It wasn't until later that I discovered theater.
Oh, amazing. Amazing.
So was it a dance studio in Long Island? I'm just curious. I grew up in Long Island as well. So
it was in Wanta. It was an entertainment company called ET Dance Factory. Okay. They were offering hip hop classes for youth. And so I started attending those classes and, learning how to basically just master the basics of dance. They saw that I, had raw material to work with, and they told my mother, get him into ballet. And of course, my response is, that's for girls, and I'm not going to ballet. Luckily, I had seen Fred Astaire and Gene Kelly before. So my parents said, well, what about tap? And I said, okay, I'll try that. And then I got introduced to West Side Story. And then they said, you got to take ballet if you want to dance like that. Lo and behold, then I ended up minoring in modern dance at college.
Amazing. You were doing Horton technique and Graham technique and all of that?
Not so much Horton. Actually, my teacher had worked for several years with Anna Sokolow.
Okay.
who in the American modern dance scene brought a whole like Tanz theater edge to her work.
Okay.
So actually one of the people who worked on West Side Story in its first production was also involved somehow with a really famous piece that Anna Sokolow did called Room, which was I don't know if it's aged that well. It's a dance piece about feeling severe depression and isolation, living in these little small boxes in New York City that are called apartment. I don't know if it still applies today.
Yeah.
I was apparently that piece has been taught in the DOE.
Huh. Okay.
And a lot of students have reacted well to it, where they say, "Oh yeah, this feels like my life." It kind of feels that way with social media now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That movement wasn't so much virtuosic; it was more about the quality you brought to the movement. So there was an acting element to my training when I was at Princeton, and in terms of the technique part, I'd say it came more from a Paul Taylor and Jose Limon.
Yeah. Wow, which is very physical.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Very physical. That's amazing.
I also got a lot of chances through the way they taught dance. It was only a minor. I didn't get like a conservatory type of training, but because of that, we did a lot of research and analysis and scholarship and choreography.
Awesome.
So that's where I really kind of developed that muscle.
And you talk about the nonverbal communication. Is there a freedom in being able to communicate something nonverbally? Do you? What does that mean? Talk to me a little bit more about this idea of nonverbal communication and nonverbal storytelling that speaks to you. If there's anything more you want to say about it, or if not, we can move on.
I mean, it communicates. There's a great quote by John Cage, who was a really well-known composer.
Mm-hmm.
He and Merce Cunningham were long-time collaborators. Honestly, John was actually kind of more the spokesperson for the work they were doing. And he said once, if we wanted to say something, we'd be using words. We're doing something.
Mm-hmm.
That's really resonated with me. And I think is basically the answer to your question. I think what is so fascinating to me about nonverbal storytelling is that, I don't know, I mean, even in acting, the words are saying one thing, the body language and the reactions of everybody else are communicating a whole other layer.
Yeah.
And then when you remove the words, it's like, like how far do you push what it is you're trying to communicate?
I think the reason I'm asking is, I spent many years working at La Mama, and Ellen Stewart was she was Mama, and she would always say, a lot of the world does not speak English. Find another way to communicate with them. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the stuff in La Mama is percussive and physical. And it's like, how are you telling a story that you can take this piece and bring it to Rome and people will get it, or you can bring it to Indonesia and people will get it. And so this idea of like not just creating for English language, but for something bigger or larger is something that has always resonated with me also as an artist, that, English language is not the only way to tell a story. How do you do that even in a more expansive way? And so I love you talking about nonverbal communication and storytelling.
Well, look, speaking from a neurodiverse perspective, a word you might get heard thrown around a lot is sensory processing or sensory integration. Dance provided this whole universe of how to integrate my senses. And actually the dances I would create, people did say that they noticed it seemed like there was some kind of pent up energy that when I would move, it just seemed to be exploding at me. So I think that was another reason why it fascinated me. It sort of channeled my energy into something that, I couldn't verbalize. It was just impossible to.
Right. And not only that, but the feeling I'm sure you got creating it, doing it, and then after, that's what makes an artist feel alive. For telling the story. I would love to ask a question about, the stigma of, the neurodiversity and where you think we are today in 2021 about people's point of view of this spectrum and the neurodiversity, et cetera. And do you feel a shift in it in terms of theater and the arts?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Talk to me about that, please.
I think something that was really groundbreaking was when relaxed performances were introduced, just from an audience interfacing standpoint. That was a big deal.
Yes.
I think on the artist end of things, that's a really good question. Like I said, Epic Players, for me, it sort of shifted my perception a little bit, because it wasn't like authentic autistic stories weren't being told. I remember seeing in 2009 the Hugh Dancy and Rose Byrne movie Adam.
Mm-hmm.
That was the first time I had ever watched a movie and thought to myself, and to the best of my knowledge, Hugh Dancy is not neurodivergent, but I watched that film and said, yeah, that's my life. That's my story.
Wow.
It was respectful, it was honest, and it was believable. And it didn't pander.
Mm-hmm.
The next piece of art that turned on that switch for me was the Jason Tatum show, Parenthood.
Right. Yes. The television show. Yes.
Yeah. Especially because they also included a narrative in there about a late in life diagnosis, which for me felt like that really tugged at my heartstrings, because a lot of my heroes growing up were people who didn't know that they were autistic until they were well into their 40s. Temple Grandin, John Elder Robinson, Dawn Prince Hughes are the three. Those were like my three autism heroes when I was in my adolescence. And then,
I'm sorry, and your diagnosis came when?
4. I was diagnosed at 4. I'm one of the 4.
Wow.
Yeah. So to go back to your question about in the art world, how has it changed? I think the COVID era really changed the game. The Reverb Arts Festival that the Roundabout sponsored was a big deal. Because, I can't remember ever getting a call for work where they were out and out saying, number one, we want disabled artists. And number 2, we're going to pair you up with mentors in the industry. By the way, they all have disabilities too. It felt like for once that it was like we were there. We had an army.
Yeah.
A better way of putting it. So I think that's how it's changed in the arts world, is that people with disabilities, we have an army now. And we're more visible in a lot of ways because of social media. And we're getting paid.
Yeah,
and you're developing your talent, right? So like you can take on the more complex storytelling, and more institutions are going to be like, hey, we can use this person because you have the experience and the training. You're doing the thing, which is really awesome.
You're being heard, number 1, and you're being paid, number 2, which is mind-blowing.
Well, one of my favorite things about Epic is, again, in keeping with the aspect of the professional development, we work with guest stars from the Broadway community.
Yeah.
They'll show up for workshops and, coach us. They will be performing alongside us in the cabaret, which is coming up this weekend at Joe's Pub, Sunday and Monday, 8 p.m. Come get tickets.
Yes.
EpicPlayersNYC.org. They've just put it on the bottom of the screen.
Yep. EpicPlayersNYC.org. Well, talk to me a little bit about, the Diverse Theater Company celebrates Halloween with Epic Villains, a wickedly inclusive cabaret at Joe's Pub at the Public Theater. You have quite a few Broadway people coming and performing with you. So talk to me about the evolution of the cabaret and what's coming up next week.
Oh, well, the cabaret is that's a semi-annual institution for Epic. We always have a fall cabaret and a spring cabaret. Mm-hmm. From what I've seen, it always seems to land on Halloween, or like around then for the fall, and then for the spring around April, like March or April, I want to say. And we always have friends from the Broadway community who show up and perform alongside us. For me, that's been really special because there's no better feeling than standing next to someone you look up to and who, as a role model, not just for their talent, but also for their work ethic. And it just kind of getting some of that energy and that channeling into, what you're delivering in the rehearsal room or on stage. What I'm really excited about for this cabaret is the germ of the idea. When we auditioned, we all were told, so we're doing, the focus is villains. And villains are just a hero whose story hasn't been told. And it's been so much fun. It's been so much fun. It's been so much fun to, I don't know, we're doing a collection of songs from the canon of popular music and Broadway music, and some film. Some of the songs are sung by villains. Some of them just have villainous types of themes. And
do you get to choose what do you bring in your own? Oh, I would like to do this, or somebody says, I want you to do this.
You can. Some people are getting to perform the song they auditioned with.
Okay.
I am not so lucky, but I am actually. I'm really excited about the songs I'm doing. So I'm in 3 numbers. The opening number, which is going to be a mashup of Grim Grinning Ghosts and the Disney song, and then a song by Voltaire called "When You're Evil." And what I like about that song is the lyrics more or less indicate I'm a pain in the ass. And I'm proud of it. Actually, I love that people hate me. Like, what person in our life don't we know who's kind of a rascal? Yeah. Like, they just get a kick out of it. We're doing, we've got one cast member who's performing Poor Unfortunate Souls. She's just eating that up.
Little Mermaid.
The other I'm doing a second mashup, a duet with the extremely talented, also epic player Catherine Tappan. We're doing a mashup of Every Breath You Take by The Police and Somebody's Watching Me by Rockwell. And
that's creepy.
It is incredibly creepy. I love The Police, and I think this is the first time that I've ever heard that song and been like, oh yeah, this song is very creepy.
It's a creepy song.
And I mean, it does that. I mean, how do I make that a hero whose stories hasn't been told? To quote Norman Bates, we all go a little mad sometimes.
Are you going to get a chance to boogie during this cabaret?
No, not so much. Joe's Pub is a very small stage. But going back to the nonverbal language, I mean, it's really fun being given that. My natural inclination is to want to move around. Look, I mean, this is a whole other challenge where I have to express the nonverbals through the dynamics in the music or the look in my eyes.
It's always fun to be the bad guy, no matter what they tell you. The bad guy is always the most fun part to play in any show.
We love to hate. We have some listeners. I encourage you, our audience, to please type in a question, and I will be happy to read it for you, for our guests. So I encourage you to please ask a question. So I just wanted to get that in there.
And again, it's epicplayersnyc.org, and the cabaret is coming up next week. Yeah, that's epicplayersnyc.org. And the cabarets are coming up next week, and you can get information by visiting their site. I'm interested in all of this partnering that Epic is doing, and how wonderful that is, right? Like, you've partnered and done things with at Lincoln Center and Joe's Pub, and you have I believe there's something coming up at Art New York. How has that been, partnering with these different organizations to bring this work to these institutions?
Look, I mean, collaboration is how the magic happens. Yeah. Art New York has always been wonderful to us. They're more or less our overhead. Do most of the listeners know how Art New York works?
No. Some, but why don't you go ahead and give like the quick
and I'm only first really like starting to understand that like organizational structure. But Art New York they're not just like a venue. They're an institution. They're an overhead for several different theater companies.
Yep.
They have a lot of real estate in the New York theater scene. Sure. And Epic, our home is in Brooklyn.
Okay.
At 138 South Oxford.
Yep.
But we also get rehearsal space in their 520. I think it's 520. On 8th Avenue.
I've rehearsed there on 8th Avenue, 520. I know it well.
And having that kind of how do I put this? Like having that kind of backing and that kind of support net is irreplaceable.
Yeah.
And we're not the only disability-focused theater company in the Art New York web. Honestly, the disability-focused theaters coming together and working together is a big part of how the Reverb Festival with the Roundabout happened.
Right.
Because we came out as an army. There were 5 of us who said we need to make this happen. I had no role in that. Those were some other people within the Epic web, but I'm so grateful to them because it gave creators with disability a chance to really put themselves out there in a venue they might not otherwise have had during quarantine.
Yeah, awesome.
Well, I think you have to be your own. I mean, speaking of, we've talked to so many artists that were like, we asked the question, what did you do when you couldn't find work? And the answer was usually, well, we just made our own work.
Yeah.
Or we collaborated with a friend and made something, or we just kept pushing down that door and kicking down that door until people heard us.
Yeah.
So no matter disability or not, we're all the same.
Yeah.
It's just about, you said creating that army to get them to do this, and that, that army, we work together. We work better together as that army to get people to hear us and to get people to see us.
Yeah. And sometimes we have to be our own heroes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even artists trying to make it, any artist, we at some point in time have to be our own heroes. And it sounds, I love what you all are doing.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really do. What are you looking forward to doing in the future that you haven't?
Idealistically or realistically?
Well,
both.
I mean, why don't you give me a little bit of both? Because I'm fascinated.
I kind of have my hands in a lot of different parts of the disability world. Right now, I'm working for a autism-focused headhunter that partners with Fortune 500 companies on launching autism hiring initiatives for competitive roles.
Okay.
Integrate Autism Employment Advisors. Come check us out.
Repeat what that is. Repeat
Integrate Autism Employment Advisors.
Okay.
And part of the reason I'm bringing up that is to go back to your earlier question about how has the landscape changed. There are companies that are, arising across the world that are employing college graduates with autism in full-time roles with salaried benefits. There's several more self-advocates who are speaking up. I would say even the face of autism is changing. For very many years, people associated it with the Bill Gates archetype. I'm meeting artists of color who are on the spectrum. I'm meeting business owners who are on the spectrum. I'm meeting authors and, global diversity and inclusion advocates who are on the spectrum. And so I think what I would like to see happen, or what I'd like to be involved in, is digging more into sort of chiseling away at getting that, steady kind of leadership role in the arts for my community.
Yeah, I see.
Awesome. In terms of idealistic from a completely narcissistic standpoint, my God, I'd love to work with. I'd love to be on Broadway one day. It's one of those things. If
you know what?
Die,
it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. You've put it out there. You've said it. You've stated it. It will happen. You will work towards it. It's gonna happen for you.
Thank you.
I mean, I would say just keep doing what you're doing. I mean, you're a talented young man, and
charming, and charm goes a long way on the Broadway.
It does. And you are, you're paving a way for yourself and for people within your community. And yes, you will do it. There's nothing to be ashamed of. Everybody wants to make it to Broadway. I would say anybody in the arts wants to make it to Broadway. What, John?
You just reminded me of something, and I'm glad that you're with an initiative that's encouraging organizations to employ people with these issues. I totally, in talking to you, just remembered I did a play called Boy Steals Train, which was about Darius, who was this Black man who had Asperger's, and he stole a train when he was 15 and rode it in the New York subway and was picking up passengers and conducting the whole train. And instead of the MTA kind of going, hey, okay, you have the skill set, these trains, they kind of demonized him, and it really kind of made his life very unfortunate. And so I'm so glad that there is a different understanding rather than criminalizing, to be able to go, no, actually, there's probably some benefits for us hiring people with these issues and, with Asperger's or this passion for these things, because they understand it in a way that is so full. So I'm glad that you're advocating for your community in this way, and that sensitivity is growing in all areas. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you. This is a play, you said, Boy Steals Train?
Yeah. It was something we did in 2003. It was a devised piece of theater, and we took it to the Edinburgh Festival, and it was a wonderful piece. Yeah.
Since you mentioned plays about persons on the spectrum, what was a real treat for me? Seeing The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, and noticing they never said it. They never once said autism. You just knew because of how he carried himself.
Yes.
I found that incredible and fascinating, and I take my hat off to the director and the playwright who purposely did it that way. I saw it in London and I saw it here, and the same thing. It's a magnificent play. I love it.
For me, it was just such a celebration in my mind.
Of course.
this is how far we've come, that you don't have to say it. It's self-evident.
Yeah.
Like that was a really special experience for me.
Well, I don't know about you, Eric, but this has been a special experience for me.
Yes, I was just going to say, you are a very special young man, Preston, and we're so honored that you came on the show. I can't wait to see what you do next. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, the Epic Players celebrates Halloween with epic villains, a wickedly inclusive cabaret at Joe's Pub at the Public Theater this weekend. So get your tickets and come see this talented young man do 3 songs.
And try not to boogie, even though he wants.
Yeah, and try not to dance on that small stage. I thank you all. Thank you, John. Thank you, listeners. That is our show. Next week on Monday, October 25th, John, Andrew, and I will interview Mr. Ruben Santiago Hudson, who is currently starring on Broadway in Lackawanna Blues. We will talk about that show, which he also wrote and directed, as well as his numerous other Broadway and off-Broadway credits, and of course, the Fine Arts Center bearing his name, the Ruben Santiago Hudson Fine Arts Learning Center. And we have a packed lineup for November and December, which we expect to announce very shortly. Some very exciting people and guests and artists. For more information about these and future guests and how to attend recordings online can be found on our website, live@thelortel.com. Thank you for joining us. Remember, get vaccinated, wear a mask, and be safe. We hope to see you in the theater really, really soon. I cannot wait. Thank you again, our dear guest. Preston, you are you're an inspiration. Yeah. Good night. Be safe. We'll see you soon.
Night, night.
Thank you for having me. Stay epic.